The drop ship shook violently as it entered the atmosphere of Outpost 7. Captain James Miller gripped his harness tighter, his weathered face showing little emotion despite the turbulence. Around him, 20 soldiers of the Earth Defense Force sat in rigid silence, each lost in their own thoughts before the coming battle. 2 minutes to touchdown, announced the pilot's voice over the intercom. Enemy forces detected near the landing zone. Prepare for immediate engagement. Miller nodded to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Ray Davis. They had been fighting the Krell for 3 years now, insectoid aliens bent on claiming human colony worlds as their own. This mission was supposed to be a standard sweep and clear operation of an abandoned research facility. Intelligence suggested the Krell had taken over the facility 6 months ago. The ship lurched again before settling into a smoother descent. The red warning lights switched to green, and with a heavy thud, they landed. "Move out!" shouted Miller as the doors hissed open. The soldiers poured out into the alien landscape, a barren, rocky terrain under a purple sky with twin moons visible even in daylight. Gunfire erupted almost immediately. The Krell had been waiting. Miller took cover behind a large boulder, firing his pulse rifle at the incoming aliens. Their chittering battle cries filled the air as they swarmed forward. "Alpha Team, left flank! Beta, with me to the facility!" Miller ordered through his helmet comms. The soldiers moved with practiced precision, laying down covering fire as they advanced toward the research complex, a collection of domed buildings nestled against a cliff face. After 30 minutes of intense fighting, they secured the outer perimeter. 5 soldiers were wounded, but none killed, better than expected against the Krell. "Lieutenant, take 4 men and secure the east wing. I'll take the main lab," Miller commanded. The facility was eerily quiet after the chaos outside. Miller's boots echoed on the metal floors as he led his team through the main corridor. Signs of battle were everywhere, scorch marks from energy weapons, broken equipment, and the occasional human body, long dead. "Check every room," Miller ordered. "Looking for intel on Krell movements and any research data that survived." Private Tom Wilson, the youngest on the team at only 22, pushed open a door at the end of the hall. "Captain, you need to see this," he called, his voice unusually soft. Miller rushed over, weapon raised, expecting an ambush. Instead, what he found left him speechless. In the center of what appeared to be a medical lab sat a small figure, huddled under a desk. Not human, that was clear from the faint blue tint to her skin and the delicate ridges along her forehead. But not Krell either. The alien child appeared female, humanoid, and couldn't have been more than 8 years old by human standards. She looked up at the soldiers with large, silver eyes filled with fear. "Hold your fire," Miller said unnecessarily. No one had even raised their weapons at the child. "Wilson, translator." Wilson fumbled with his gear and activated the Universal Translator, a device that had proven effective with most known alien species. "We won't hurt you," Miller said, crouching down to appear less threatening. "What's your name? How did you get here?" The translator hummed, processing his words into the most likely language based on the child's appearance. The girl trembled but didn't retreat further. After a moment, she spoke in a musical language none of them recognized. The translator beeped twice before producing. "My name is Lyra. Please don't leave me here." Miller exchanged glances with his team. This was completely outside mission parameters. An unknown alien species, a child no less, in an abandoned human research facility recently occupied by the Krell. "Are you alone, Lyra? Where are your people?" Miller asked. Lyra's silver eyes welled with tears. "Gone. All gone. Father said stay hidden. Said humans would return." Her small blue hand reached out tentatively toward Miller. "Are you my father's people?" Before Miller could respond, Lieutenant Davis's voice crackled over the comm. "Captain, East Wing secure, but we found something strange. Data logs indicating some kind of genetic research project. Code name Bridge. Looks like they were studying compatibility between human and non-human DNA." Miller looked at the alien child with new understanding. Her somewhat human appearance, her presence in this facility, her mention of a father. "Lyra," he said gently, "do you know who your father is?" The alien girl nodded, her expression brightening with hope. She pointed directly at the emblem on Miller's uniform, the Earth Defense Force insignia. "Human soldier," she said. "Father is human soldier." The implications hit Miller like a physical blow. Whatever had happened in this facility went far beyond standard research. Somehow, this child was part human, perhaps the very product of Project Bridge. And now, she was his responsibility. "Pack up," Miller ordered his team. "We're taking her with us. Command needs to know about this." As Wilson carefully helped Lyra from her hiding place, Miller's calm buzzed again. "Captain," came Davis's urgent voice. "We've got more Krell incoming. A lot more. And they seem really interested in this place." Miller looked at the alien child now holding Wilson's hand. Whatever she was, the Krell wanted her badly enough to send reinforcements. "All teams, fall back to the drop ship," Miller commanded. "We've got what we came for, and more." As they rushed back through the facility, Miller couldn't help wondering what exactly they were bringing back to Earth, and what consequences would follow. The journey back to the dropship was chaos. Miller led the way, with Wilson carrying Lyra in his arms. The small alien girl clung to the young soldier, her silver eyes wide with fear as the sounds of Krell weapons echoed behind them. "Move faster!" Miller shouted as they emerged from the facility into the harsh daylight. The dropship was 300 meters away across open ground, and the Krell were gaining. Lieutenant Davis and his team provided covering fire from the rear. "They're really determined, sir," Davis called out. "Never seen them this aggressive." Miller glanced back at Lyra. Something about this child was important enough for the Krell to risk heavy losses. That alone made her valuable to Earth. "Runner at 2 o'clock!" shouted Private Wilson. A lone Krell warrior was sprinting toward them from the side, moving with frightening speed on its 6 limbs. Miller raised his rifle and fired 3 quick bursts. The Krell tumbled forward, green fluid spraying from its wounds, but not before it released something from its upper appendage, a small, dart-like object that flew directly toward Wilson and Lyra. Without thinking, Miller threw himself forward, knocking Wilson and the alien child to the ground. The dart struck Miller's shoulder armor, releasing a hissing cloud of yellow gas before falling away. "Captain?" Wilson shouted. "I'm fine," Miller grunted, though his shoulder burned where the dart had struck. "Keep moving!" They reached the drop ship as the pilot was already starting the engines. The remaining soldiers piled in, still firing at the pursuing Krell. "Everyone aboard?" Miller demanded, doing a quick count. "All present, sir," Davis confirmed. 2 more wounded, but nothing critical. Miller nodded and turned to Wilson, who was settling Lyra into a seat designed for someone twice her size. The alien girl was trembling, her blue skin now pale with fear, but she wasn't crying. She watched the human soldiers with an expression of wonder mixed with terror. "Strap in," Miller told her through the translator. "We're leaving." The drop ship lurched skyward, the hull rattling as Krell weapons struck its underside. Within moments, they were climbing through the atmosphere, leaving the firefight behind. In the relative calm of ascent, Miller turned his attention back to Lyra. The other soldiers were watching her curiously, some with suspicion, others with something like protective concern. "Wilson, get a med kit," Miller ordered. "Davis, contact command. Tell them." He paused, considering his words carefully. "Tell them we've rescued a survivor from the research facility. Possible connection to Project Bridge. Request secure containment protocols upon arrival." Davis nodded and moved toward the comm station. Wilson returned with the med kit and knelt before Lyra. "I don't know if our medicine works on her kind, sir." "Just check for injuries," Miller said. "Nothing invasive." As Wilson gently examined the alien child, Miller felt a strange sensation in his shoulder where the dart had struck. The burning had subsided, replaced by a cool numbness that was spreading slowly down his arm. He made a mental note to report to medical as soon as they returned to base. Sir? Wilson said, looking up from Lyra. She's asking for you. Miller knelt beside the alien child, her silver eyes fixed on him with an unsettling intensity. The bad ones want me, she said through the translator. They know what I am. What are you? Miller asked quietly. Lyra touched her chest with 3 slender blue fingers. I am the bridge. Father said so. Bridge between humans and... The translator struggled with the next word, finally settling on. The stars. Miller frowned. Your father, the human soldier, he worked at that facility. Lyra nodded. He made me special. To help both peoples. Her small face contorted with effort, as if trying to remember something important. Father said if bad ones came, find other humans with this. She pointed again at Miller's Earth Defense Force insignia. Captain, Davis called from the comm station. Command is concerned about our new passenger. General Reed wants to speak with you privately. Miller sighed. Of course they were concerned. An unknown alien child claiming to be half-human, rescued from a secret research facility. This had interstellar incident written all over it. Look after her, Miller told Wilson as he stood. The numbness in his arm had reached his elbow now, but he ignored it. Keep her calm. As Miller walked to the comm station, he noticed Lyra watching him with those strange silver eyes. Not with fear anymore, but with something like recognition. It made him deeply uneasy, though he couldn't explain why. Whatever Project Bridge had been, whoever this child's father was, Miller knew their mission had just become far more complicated than a simple sweep and clear operation. And somewhere deep in his mind, a disturbing question formed: what if the Krell weren't trying to kill the child, but to rescue her? The conversation with General Reed was brief and tense. Miller stood at attention before the small video screen, aware of the growing numbness in his arm. A hybrid child? Reed's face showed disbelief. Miller, do you understand what you're saying? Human-alien hybridization is theoretical at best, impossible at worst. With respect, sir, the evidence is sitting 20 feet away from me, Miller replied. And the Krell seemed very interested in getting her back. Reed's expression darkened. Project Bridge was classified beyond your clearance, Captain. The fact you even know the name is concerning. Found it in the facility's data logs, sir. And the girl mentioned it herself. Reed was silent for a moment, his eyes calculating. When you dock with the Dauntless, the child will be transferred to a secure medical bay. You and your team will undergo full decontamination and debriefing. Understood, sir. And Miller, Reed added, this stays quiet. No discussions with your team about the child's origins or this Project Bridge. That's an order. The screen went dark. Miller stood there, flexing his fingers, trying to work feeling back into his hand. The numbness had spread past his elbow now. He should report to medical, but something held him back, an instinct that told him to keep this to himself for now. He returned to find Lyra asleep, her head resting against Wilson's arm. The young private looked up at Miller with concern. She just fell asleep, sir. Is she going to be okay? When we get back to the ship, I mean. Miller sat heavily in the seat across from them. Command has protocols for this situation. With all due respect, sir, I doubt they have protocols for a half-human alien child. Miller couldn't argue with that. He looked at Lyra's sleeping form, so small, so vulnerable. Her blue skin had a faint glow to it under the dropship's harsh lights. The ridges on her forehead seemed to pulse slightly with each breath. She said something else while you were talking to Command, Wilson said quietly. Something about her father keeping records. Said he hid them for the right humans to find. Miller's eyes narrowed. Did she say where? Wilson shook his head. She started to get upset, so I changed the subject. But sir. He hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. She asked if we knew someone named John Miller. The name hit Miller like a physical blow. John Miller, his brother. His younger brother who had disappeared 5 years ago during a scientific expedition to study newly discovered alien ruins. Officially listed as killed in action, body never recovered. Sir? Wilson was watching him closely. Do you know who that is? Miller's mind raced. It couldn't be coincidence. But his brother wasn't a soldier, he was a xenobiologist. And he certainly wasn't involved in any secret military projects like Bridge. Maybe, Miller said finally. But it doesn't make sense. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. Approaching the Dauntless. Docking in 5 minutes. Miller stood, steadying himself against the sudden dizziness that washed over him. The numbness had reached his shoulder now, and strange images were flickering at the edges of his vision, alien landscapes he'd never seen, faces that weren't human. Sir, are you all right? Wilson asked. Fine, Miller said curtly. Wake the girl. She needs to be ready when we dock. As Wilson gently roused Lyra, Miller moved to the window. The massive shape of the Dauntless, Earth's premier battleship, loomed ahead, a hulking shadow against the stars. Somewhere on that ship, answers waited. But Miller was increasingly certain he wouldn't like them. Lyra came to stand beside him, her small blue hand reaching up to touch the cold glass of the window. Home? She asked through the translator. Miller shook his head. Not home. But safe for now. Lyra looked up at him, those silver eyes seeming to see right through him. You are changing, she said simply. Before Miller could ask what she meant, the drop ship shuddered as docking clamps engaged. The mission was over, but Miller felt like something much bigger was just beginning. As they prepared to disembark, Miller made a decision. Whatever General Reed's orders, whatever protocols waited, he needed to know the truth. If his brother was somehow connected to this child, if John was her father, then this wasn't just a mission anymore. It was personal. And the numbness crawling through his body told him time might be running out to discover the truth. The drop ship doors opened, revealing a squad of heavily armed soldiers and medical personnel in hazmat suits. Their orders were clear in their stance. The alien child would be taken, and the team separated. Miller placed himself between Lyra and the waiting soldiers. Captain Miller, a voice announced over the ship's comm system. Please step aside and allow the containment team to secure the alien entity. Miller felt Lyra's small hand slip into his numb one. Against all military training and protocol, he squeezed it reassuringly. Whatever happened next, he wouldn't let her face it alone. Captain Miller, this is your final warning. Step aside. The voice over the comm system had hardened. Miller felt his team watching him, waiting for his decision. Behind him, Wilson shifted nervously. Sir? Lieutenant Davis whispered. What are you doing? What was he doing? Miller wasn't sure himself. The military discipline ingrained in him for 20 years screamed to follow orders. But the numbness had spread to his chest now, and with it came flashes of memories? Not his own, alien landscapes, strange symbols, and a face that looked like his brother's, but older, more weathered. The child stays with me until I speak with General Reed in person, Miller announced, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. The hazmat team exchanged glances. One of them, a woman with commander insignia, stepped forward. Captain, I'm Commander Trent, ship's security. The girl needs medical attention. So do you, from the looks of it. Miller noticed his hand was trembling. The one not holding Lyra's. Medical attention together, Miller countered. She stays in my sight. Commander Trent studied him for a long moment, then nodded slightly. Agreed. But your team still needs decontamination. Davis. Miller turned to his lieutenant. Take charge of the squad. Standard debrief. Davis hesitated, clearly torn between duty and loyalty. Sir, with respect, something's wrong with you. Let me, that's an order, Lieutenant. Davis stiffened, then nodded. Yes, sir. As the rest of the team was led away, Wilson lingered. Captain, he said quietly, she trusts you. Whatever's happening, don't let them hurt her. The earnestness in the young soldier's eyes touched something in Miller. I won't. Minutes later, Miller and Lyra were escorted to a sealed medical bay. The room was stark and clinical, with monitoring equipment lining the walls and a two-way mirror along one side. Miller had no doubt they were being observed. A doctor in a hazmat suit entered, regarding them both with clinical interest. "I'm Dr. Hayes," she introduced herself. "I understand you've been exposed to an unknown Krell agent, Captain. And this is our visitor. Her name is Lyra," Miller said firmly. Hayes nodded, but her attention was already on Lyra's unusual features. Remarkable. Humanoid structure but clearly non-human skin composition and cranial features. She activated a handheld scanner. "I'll need to run basic diagnostics on both of you." As the doctor worked, Miller's vision blurred again. The room seemed to shift, and for a moment, he saw a different medical facility, the research lab on Outpost 7, but intact, before the Krell attack. In this vision, his brother John stood over a medical pod, looking down at something inside with an expression of wonder and fear. "Captain? Captain Miller?" Miller blinked, and the vision faded. Dr. Hayes was staring at him with concern. "Your vitals are erratic, and there's some kind of foreign agent in your bloodstream," she said. "I need to start treatment immediately." "No," Miller said, shaking his head. "Not yet. I need to speak with General Reed first. Captain, whatever the Krell hit you with is spreading through your system rapidly. If we don't..." The door to the medical base slid open, and General Reed himself walked in. The older man's face was granite hard, his eyes cold as they moved from Miller to Lyra. "Doctor, leave us," Reed ordered. Hayes looked ready to protest, but a sharp glance from Reed silenced her. She left, casting a worried look back at Miller. When the door closed, Reed turned to Lyra. "So this is Project Bridge." "Smaller than I expected." Miller stepped between them. "Sir, this child asked about my brother. John Miller. She says he's her father." Reed's expression didn't change. "Your brother died 5 years ago, Captain." "Did he? Or was he recruited for Project Bridge?" The room swam around Miller, but he forced himself to stay upright. "What was Project Bridge, sir?" "Really?" Reed sighed. "A mistake. One we're still cleaning up." He looked at Lyra with something close to disdain. "Your brother was brilliant, but reckless. When we discovered the Valkyrie ruins on Outpost 7, he was assigned to study them. But he went beyond his orders." "Valkyrie?" The word felt familiar in Miller's mouth, though he'd never heard it before. "An ancient species, long extinct. Or so we thought." Reed nodded toward Lyra. "The ruins contained genetic samples. Your brother became obsessed with the idea of restoring them. When the Krell attacked the neighboring system, he saw an opportunity for an alliance. He believed a hybrid child, part human, part Valkyrie, could bridge our species." "The bridge," Lyra whispered, her silver eyes fixed on Reed. Reed's jaw tightened. "It wasn't sanctioned. When we discovered what he was doing, we shut it down. But John disappeared with his research and the specimen." "She's not a specimen," Miller growled. "She's a child. She's an unauthorized genetic experiment that could cause an interstellar incident." Reed snapped back. "And you're compromised, Captain. The Krell weapon that hit you, it's not lethal. It's a memory catalyst, designed to activate dormant genetic memory." Miller stared at him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Reed replied coldly, "that your brother did more than create a hybrid. He found a way to store Valkyrie knowledge, their entire cultural memory, in genetic code. And now the Krell want it. They'll stop at nothing to get it." Lyra suddenly spoke, her voice clear even through the translator. "Father said you would try to take me away. Said not all humans understand the gift." Reed's eyes narrowed. "What gift?" Lyra turned to Miller, whose legs finally gave out. As he slumped to the floor, she placed her small blue hand on his forehead. "The gift of remembering," she said simply. "The gift of knowing the stars." Miller's world exploded into light and sound. As Lyra's small hand touched his forehead, a flood of images crashed through his mind: stars being born, planets forming, civilizations rising and falling across thousands of years. He saw the Valkyrie, a race of blue-skinned beings with silver eyes, masters of biology and the mind, spreading peacefully through the stars. And he saw their end, a terrible war with the Krell, who feared the Valkyrie's growing power. He saw the last survivors hiding their genetic legacy, encoding their entire history into samples that would lie dormant for millennia. Then, more recent memories. His brother John discovering the ruins, understanding their importance, and making the fateful decision to combine human and Valkyrie DNA. Not out of arrogance, but desperation. The Krell were returning, and humanity needed allies. Get her away from him! Reed's voice seemed distant as hands pulled Lyra back. Miller gasped as the connection broke, his body shaking violently. 2 security officers had entered the room and were restraining Lyra, who wasn't fighting them but looked at Miller with desperate intensity. You have to remember, she said. Father gave you the key. Miller struggled to his feet, swaying. What is she talking about? What key? Reed stepped back, hand moving to his sidearm. Captain, you're experiencing hallucinations induced by the Krell toxin. You need medical attention immediately. But Miller knew these weren't hallucinations. They were memories, both his brother's and the ancient Valkyries. And something else was surfacing from deep in his own memory. 5 years ago, before John disappeared, they had met for drinks in a bar on Earth. John had been excited, talking about a discovery that would change everything, but unable to share details. Before leaving, he had given Miller a small metal chip, saying, "Keep this safe. If anything happens to me, this will explain everything." Miller had kept the chip, more out of sentiment than believing his brother's dramatic words. It was still in his quarters back on Earth, hidden in an old family photo frame. John gave me something, Miller said slowly, before he disappeared. A data chip. Reed's expression hardened. Where is it? Somewhere you'll never find it, Miller lied, buying time. The room was starting to spin again, but he forced himself to focus. What happened to my brother, General? The truth this time. Reed glanced at the security officers. Take the alien to containment level 4. Full isolation protocols. No! Miller lunged forward but collapsed to one knee, his body betraying him. Lyra didn't struggle as they led her away, but her eyes never left Miller. Fine, Father, she said as the door closed behind them. Alone with Reed, Miller felt the last of his strength ebbing. You didn't answer my question. Reed knelt beside him, voice low. Your brother went rogue, Captain. When we discovered what he was doing with the Valkyrie DNA, he refused to terminate the project. He believed the Valkyrie knowledge could help us defeat the Krell. I gave him a direct order, and he disobeyed. So you had him killed? Miller's voice was barely a whisper. Reed's silence was answer enough. But he outsmarted you, Miller continued. He completed the project. Created Lyra. Hid her away until we found her. A mistake I'm correcting now. Reed stood. The hybrid will be studied, then terminated. We can't risk the Krell getting their hands on Valkyrie knowledge. She's a child, Miller protested weakly. She's a weapon. Reed moved toward the door. And so are you now, Captain. Whatever that Krell dart did to you, it's linking you to the Valkyrie memories. Which makes you just as dangerous. As Reed reached the door, it slid open to reveal Private Wilson, his weapon raised. Sir, don't move, Wilson said to Reed, his young face determined but frightened. Reed froze. Private, lower your weapon immediately. That's an order. Not happening, sir. Wilson glanced at Miller. Lieutenant Davis intercepted the security feed. We heard everything. He stepped into the room, keeping his weapon trained on Reed. The squad is with me, Captain. We're getting you and the girl out of here. Reed's face darkened with rage. This is treason. You're throwing away your careers, your lives, for what? An alien experiment? For the truth, Wilson replied. And because it's the right thing to do. Miller struggled to his feet, the room tilting around him. Wilson. Lyra, containment level 4. Davis is already on it, sir. But we need to move now. As Wilson secured Reed, Miller fought against the darkness creeping at the edges of his vision. The Valkyrie memories were becoming stronger, more insistent. Among them, he caught glimpses of his brother's face, speaking words he couldn't quite hear. "Find the key," John's voice whispered in his mind. Miller realized with sudden clarity that the data chip wasn't just evidence of Project Bridge, it was the key to saving Lyra, humanity, and perhaps even stopping the Krell forever. But first, they had to escape the Dauntless. And time was running out. Alarms blared throughout the Dauntless as Miller, supported by Wilson, made his way through the service corridors. The young private had bound and gagged General Reed, leaving him locked in a supply closet, a crime that would end Wilson's military career, if not his life. "Status?" Miller asked, fighting to stay conscious. The Valkyrie memories were becoming harder to separate from his own. "Davis has Lyra," Wilson reported, checking his comm device. "They're heading for Shuttle Bay 3. We've got 5 minutes before security overrides the lockdowns we put in place." Miller nodded weakly. His entire body felt foreign now, as if it wasn't entirely his own anymore. "Wilson, if I don't make it, you'll make it, sir," Wilson interrupted firmly. "We all will." They reached a junction where Lieutenant Davis waited with 3 other members of the squad. Between them stood Lyra, looking small and fragile among the armored soldiers. "Captain," Davis acknowledged. His face was grim but determined. "The shuttle's prepped. But we've got company coming, a lot of it." Miller straightened, drawing on reserves of strength he didn't know he had. "You've all committed treason for me and this child. I won't forget it." "With respect, sir," Davis replied. "We're following a higher order than General Reed's. If what we heard is true, this is about humanity's survival." Lyra stepped forward, placing her small blue hand in Miller's. Instantly, a sense of clarity cut through the chaos in his mind. "The ship knows," she said. "It feels us together." Miller understood suddenly. "The Krell dart, it wasn't meant to hurt me. It was meant to help me connect with you. The Krell don't want to destroy the Valkyrie knowledge. They want to protect it." The realization struck him like lightning. "They're not our enemies." "Not really." "Sir, that's the toxin talking," Davis said worriedly. "No," Miller insisted. "The Krell fought the Valkyrie thousands of years ago, yes. But they've evolved, changed. They recognized what my brother was trying to do. They've been trying to rescue Lyra, not capture her." "Captain, we need to move," Wilson urged as the sound of booted feet echoed from a nearby corridor. They rushed toward the shuttle bay, encountering only token resistance that they quickly overcame. As they reached the small transport vessel, Miller's knees finally gave out. "Get him aboard," Davis ordered. As they carried Miller into the shuttle, the bay doors began to close, security finally catching up to them. "We'll never clear those doors in time," one of the soldiers said. Lyra stepped to the shuttle's viewport, her silver eyes focused on the massive doors. She placed both hands on the glass and closed her eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a grinding screech, the bay doors stopped moving, then slowly began to reopen. "How?" Wilson gasped. "Valkyrie were telepathic," Miller mumbled, the knowledge surfacing from the alien memories flooding his mind. "They could interface with technology directly." Davis took the pilot's seat and fired up the engines. "Whatever she's doing, let's not waste it." The shuttle shot out of the bay just as security forces burst in, their weapons firing too late. Within minutes, they were clear of the Dauntless and accelerating toward the nearest jump point. In the passenger compartment, Miller lay on a medical cot, with Lyra sitting beside him. Her small hand rested on his forehead, her eyes closed in concentration. "What's she doing?" Wilson asked softly. "Helping me control the memories," Miller answered. "There's so much knowledge, too much for a human mind to process all at once." "Where do we go now, sir?" Davis called from the cockpit. Miller thought of the data chip hidden in his quarters on Earth. "Earth first. There's something I need. Then..." He looked at Lyra, who opened her eyes and met his gaze. "Then we find the rest of the Valkyrie." The rest? Wilson frowned. I thought they were extinct. Not extinct, Miller said. Hidden. My brother discovered more than just genetic samples. There's a colony ship, in stasis, hidden at the edge of known space. That's what's on the chip, coordinates, access codes. And the Krell? Davis asked. What about them? We'll need to talk to them, Miller said. Properly this time. Without shooting first. He winced as a particularly strong wave of memories washed over him. The Valkyrie tried to fight them and lost. We need to find another way. Lyra's voice was soft but clear through the translator. 3 peoples together. That was Father's plan. Human strength, Valkyrie wisdom, Krell protection. Your father was a visionary, Miller told her gently. And I promise you, his work won't be in vain. As the shuttle prepared to jump to light speed, Miller felt a strange peace settle over him. The path ahead would be difficult. They were now fugitives, hunted by their own people. But they carried with them the hope for a different future, not just for humanity, but for 3 species that might yet find a way to the stars together. Is it true? Lyra asked suddenly. Was my father really your brother? Miller looked at the child who represented the impossible, a bridge between worlds. In her face, he could see traces of his brother's features, impossible as that seemed. Yes, he said finally. But he's your father in more ways than one. And he would be very proud of you. Lyra smiled, the first real smile Miller had seen from her. As the stars streaked into lines around them and the shuttle jumped to light speed, Miller silently promised his brother that he would finish what John had started. The abandoned alien girl had found her family. And perhaps, in doing so, she would save them all.